Hi everybody, welcome to this week's Property Chat. This week we want to talk about surveys, what they mean, how to interpret them, when to worry and when not to worry. Stand by. Hi everybody, surveys. One of the most difficult times in a sale is when the survey comes back and you see it for the first time, and if you're not used to looking at them, they can be quite daunting. So we need to get a little bit of perspective on what they are and who they're for. So the first type of survey you can have is the basic survey called a mortgage valuation. This is there to make sure that the property that you're buying is suitable security for the lender. So it tends to be quite brief, usually 1 or 2 pages. And what this will do is outline whether the property is considered suitable security for your loan. It will then go on to disclaim things like, we would recommend that you do various tests quite regularly. These surveys come out that way, so that the surveyors can't get caught out by you suing them later by saying, oh, well, you didn't pick up on this, that or the other. So, the important thing to remember is a mortgage valuation survey is just that. It's to make sure the property is suitable security for the loan. Now we move on to the next stage of survey, the Homebuyers report. Now this is a meaty and much more detailed report. And surveyors are very qualified people. They do study for a number of years to get their qualifications. So their survey shouldn't be taken lightly on the one hand. On the other hand, most problems which can look really daunting at first can be resolved after careful consideration, sometimes negotiation, depending on the type of problem. You can resolve these things. So if you look at your survey and you're horrified, do take a deep breath before you decide to pull out and speak to professionals. Quite often we find that when people have spoken to their friends and their friends have always known someone who that happened to and now they live in a tent, you just need to get some realistic perspective from people who know. And that means going through the issues that bother you and then addressing them one by one. Now the typical home buyers report goes into a large number of pages and will take you through various aspects of the property, including drainage, roof, guttering, electrics, gas, plumbing, as well as dampness and condensation. Now I'm going to start with dampness because dampness comes up again and again as a major issue, and it does fall into 3 distinct categories. There is a video on this that we've done regarding tenancies, which you might find interesting if you do find that condensation is coming up particularly, and we'll flag that now here. Apart from that, there are 3 types of dampness briefly. First of all, there's penetrating damp. This is where, for instance, a gutter may have given way, and therefore when it rains, the water will come through the gutter, drip onto the brick wall, which are normally porous, and then dribble through onto the inside of the property. It could also be from a leaking water pipe that's sometimes buried in brickwork or plaster, and the dampness then comes through from that. The way to distinguish the rising dampness from penetrating damp, one good rule is that rising dampness will only go to about 1 metre. So if you're looking on the first floor and you see dampness, it's not rising damp, it's certainly some form of penetrating damp. There are companies which specialise in coming out and visiting properties and will then assess the level of dampness within them and hopefully the source of that dampness as well. Quite often some of these larger companies are commission driven. They do these things for free and in the hope of getting work. So you do have to again put some perspective on it. They offer long-term warranties though, so you can get a 20+ year warranty on dampness if it's a rising damp issue, and some of the large contractors will come out and do that for you. However, it can often be resolved by a local builder who can do the same sort of thing at a much lower cost, but often won't provide the long-term guarantees, and your lender might require those depending on what your survey actually says. So, surveys as far as dampness is concerned, these reports are often free. If you Google damp and timber inspections, then you'll find a number of companies offering these services, and then from there you can have an inspection. It won't cost you any money. So that's the first thing I would say. If you're a purchaser and you're worried about dampness, penetrating damp or otherwise, then that's the thing you should look at certainly. Now moving on through to electrics. Often the survey will say that the electrics don't meet the current standard. Well, given that standards change every 3 years, that's hardly surprising. It doesn't mean that the property is necessarily electrically unsafe. So it's very important that we distinguish between something that's electrically completely up to date and something which is unsafe. What a survey report will often say is we recommend an electrical inspection. Now that doesn't mean necessarily that everything is completely dangerous and redundant. quite often it means that certain items might or might not need addressing, and the test will tell out. Unfortunately, electricians will charge for this test because it is a substantive test, and normally one can expect to pay around £125 for an electrical test. As far as the gas is concerned, again, you can find they recommend tests for things like the boilers and functionality, maybe check on service records. You need somebody that's registered on a gas safe register to do those inspections and checks for you. Now, with regards to cracking and subsidence, this will often come up, and sometimes it can be very alarming when a surveyor points out that there's a large crack and he recommends further inspection. And again, depending on the type, extent and style of the crack, you can often tell how severe it is. Obviously, it's a specialist area. In the final analysis, if a surveyor says that it's likely to be a subsidence problem, then you can get a guy called a structural engineer. I say a guy or girl actually, but for some reason all the ones that we've met tend to be guys. And basically they will come along and they will do detailed calculations. They'll do the maths behind the likelihood of that crack getting larger or smaller. And there are most older houses built in the 1930s or before will have some form of cracking. Quite often that will come, for instance, off of the window frames. Sometimes that's because wooden glazing has been replaced with UPVC double glazing, and that doesn't have the strengthening bars in it and certainly isn't as rigid as the wood type, and so this can cause issues as well. Again, something that can be readily remedied most of the time. Sometimes bay windows are built on shallower foundations back in the 30s so that they can come away from the main house, and this could be a substantive problem and something that needs further investigation. This is the sort of thing that a structural engineer would be qualified to advise you on in more detail. But to summarise, if you had a survey done, you're just looking at the report, you're going through it with your partner and you're not specialist in the subject, I promise you 9 times out of 10 things can be resolved. If you've never seen a survey before, the important thing to remember is the surveyor is not there to tell you what a good decision you've made. He's there to put all the caution behind it, to disclaim for his own company, to make sure that you don't come back and sue him because he hasn't mentioned various tests and inspections that you should have. So what you need to do is you need to read the report thoroughly, highlight the areas that worry you, and then think about having reports done in various areas. But don't expect a survey report to come back telling you all the problems. It's far more likely to tell you specialists to go to have those problems inspected. Again, we find the same with roofs. Quite often if there's a roof problem, the surveyor will advise, a roofing specialist looks and then prices it. And in the end, it's all about the money, isn't it? What are these defects and are they likely to be substantive in terms of the cost? And this is something only the contractors that could physically fix the things could advise you. So often chatting to a well-qualified builder can be really good and put things into perspective. And indeed, any good professional estate agent like ourselves can have a chat with you. And you may not believe this, but we do want the sale to go through on the one hand, but on the other hand, we want to make sure that you're confident in your purchase, otherwise you won't go ahead anyway. So it's important to us that you're 100% confident with what you're buying, and we will help you, guide you through these reports and hopefully get things on track. 9 times out of 10 we can do so. Now and again there'll be something that comes up that really scares you and you pull out. That's always your choice. But before you do, my advice would be sit back, breathe, don't make any rash decisions. Make sure that you inspect the points that worry you thoroughly before you pull out. Because remember, for most of us, we're not buying a brand new house. These houses are second hand, so we mustn't treat them as though everything will be brand new and under warranty. There will be issues. There are ongoing maintenance issues with all houses. Most of us are on London clay. There will be some element of slippage and cracking here or there. There may be some dampness. Most of it is minor in terms of cost. It rarely runs into more than a few £1,000s, and when you think of the hundreds of thousands of pounds that we're putting towards the average purchase now in the area, it really is insignificant most of the time. If you are having a survey done and you'd like more advice, then you can always email us. The email's below rather, and hope this video has been helpful for you. Good luck in your sale or purchase. Do give us a call if we can be of any more help to you. Thanks for watching. Please like and share the video with your friends, and we'll speak to you again soon.